This is one of my hardest conceptual videos as it deals with zero and infinity, the grand paradox. Yet I would still like to start here since it is the alpha and omega of the universe, the infinite loop from nothing to everything and back. Normally, darkness is visualized as nothing, yet it seems pure light, being the opposite of darkness, is also nothing. Perception requires contrast. To me, it seems that once a master can dissolve himself from all things and become nothing, she will expand to become everything. In other words, by breaking the illusion of being a separate wave, one can expand and be the entire ocean. Scientists often like to start with first principles, so I will start with a 0D point to try and clearly explain how creation was built, generated, or emerged from the ground up. However, this begs the question, does life have a beginning, or has it always existed? The dualistic mind likes to fight about these dichotomies, whereas I find both to be true, as the truth transcends the either-or mind. Balance and integration requires learning to think in terms of both and, instead of either-or one-sided partial truths. From our point of view within the bounded finite matrix, there was a beginning. Just like a video game has a beginning for each instance to a dungeon. As for the unbounded infinite domain, I don't believe it ever began. It always existed, and one-way bounded time doesn't apply to it. I wonder if an unbounded type of time exists, where time is just a rate of change of perception, with any type of change permitted, unlike our restricted realm. Notice in our bounded and restricted realm, fractals like trees and the human body are finite or truncated. Genius Chris Langan calls realms like Earth the terminal domain, if I understand him correctly. Perhaps the tree of good and evil could be associated with this bounded finite terminal domain. In this case, good versus evil represents the human mind becoming very restricted and limited due to perceiving in binary separation instead of a unified spectrum. On the other hand, the tree of life would then represent the infinite fractal tree associated with the unbounded or non-terminal domain. This reminds me of dreams that exist in a more fluid reality where the dreamer stares at an object and it morphs into something else, shifting our attention. This morphing could continue endlessly like an infinite fractal changing as it zooms. To me, that type of dream reality more closely resembles the non-terminal domain, or at least less bounded than our current domain. Or perhaps the void or zero represents the non-terminal domain in its purest form and the dream world as being partially bounded. Back to exploring the idea of zero, singularity, or wholeness. First of all, zero, or a single point with zero area and zero volume, is undefined in terms of space and perception, as it has no space to form a pattern that consciousness can perceive, acknowledge, or measure. That which lacks a relative volume of geometric space lacks a boundary and a boundary surface area. However, if we were to imagine a boundary on that 0 point, a sphere would be the most natural shape. Not surprisingly, the symbol for 0 reflects a 2D circle or sphere in 3D. But since the 0 point is the whole, it can have nothing outside of itself and cannot be a sphere. In other videos, we will discuss how the torus solves this self-containment issue. However, it can be handy to visualize it as a tiny sphere, since the sphere has only one side and is whole in the bounded domain. Not to mention the symbol 0 is actually a circle or sphere in 3D. Fractals have infinite zoom, so the 0-point center of creation would appear to be empty like a black hole and take up zero volume until we zoomed in on that point, until that point becomes a sphere the size of the universe. Since a torus loops around on itself, it has some relation to fractals, which are made from looping math equations. Perhaps we could change the saying from turtles all the way down to toruses all the way down. I associate all of the following words with that 0 point: wholeness, stillness, silence, oneness, allness, unity, inertia, monad, balance, source, infinite potential, nowhere, now here, everywhere. As we can see, source point contains a paradox of being both nothing and everything, or at least the potential to become infinitely anything. It is the paradox of being both nowhere and everywhere. The pupil of our eye is like a black hole, which is the source of visual perception tied to the 0-point center. For some who have taken certain psychedelics have seen there are eyes everywhere. Alex Gray portrays this in some of his artwork. Since eyes are everywhere at every point, the idea of the all-seeing eye makes more sense, since that center exists at every point. The flower of life's overlapping circles intersect and form the vesica piscis throughout. This is the shape of an eye and female genitalia. The eye is the male portal of light into this world, and the female portal is how the physical body enters this world. Think of the two overlapping circles as the male and female, the yin-yang polar split, and the center is where consciousness emerges from the contrast of this duality. Life is created when male and female merge. That union of male and female is the totality of God, the Creator. If we decide to call that 0-point center of all things God, then I suppose I am trying to lead us into a more technical understanding of what God is. According to Carlos Castaneda, the ancient sorcerers of the Toltec lineage didn't use the word God. The dark sea of awareness was their preferred term. This term is nice as it is descriptive and paradoxical in nature. The sea or infinite dark waters are unbounded and also the source of life and the single point of perception, the all-seeing eye. Look into the black pupil of an eye where the individuated being's awareness is centered in the dark sea and looking outward at this amazing holographic light show. The dark sea of awareness sounds very much like an unbounded and unseen source point. We must zoom into it to see the vast ocean of life down the fractal rabbit hole. In the Order of the Golden Dawn, they have a book called Chymatica, which contains the ancient teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, the Greek name, or Thoth, Egyptian name. In those teachings, God is called the All. The All implies that reality is self-contained and there is no outside of it. Interestingly, the word Allah is similar to the word all. Maybe coincidence, maybe not. Descriptive terms give at least some clarity to the indescribable God thingy we are trying to describe. Source is another descriptive, simple word I sometimes use to point to the, source of life. If we are all going to find common ground and stop the wars in the name of God, it seems to me we should start using language that is less loaded and vague. Even if language is very limiting in a reality that is way beyond words, we can still do better with our use of language to minimize misunderstandings. Let's not be suckers for words as well as choose our words wisely. If you take something and stretch it out far enough, it looks like nothing or outer space, but that is just a perspective. In this way, thing and no thing are coupled or essentially the same thing. Thing and no thing are a unified spectrum of degrees, not two separate things as the mind may think of them. For light and dark, think of a dimmer switch instead of a two-state toggle switch. Imagine the universe as one big stretchy blanket. Things are where we crumple the blanket, and no thing is where the blanket is vastly stretched and appears empty. Integrating the split mind back into unity is part of our development. This video was meant to give a bit of insight into the 0 point, which appears to be 0D and empty from our perspective. Fractals and zoom help us visualize how each point can contain God, the All. That is enough for now. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed. I am thrilled to be alive with all of you during this quickening of discovery. It's time to widen our perception.